All right. Let's get started here. Welcome back to Authors on Tap, where we host amazing writers in conversation with other equally amazing writers. My name is Javier Ramirez, and along with Kristen Gilbert, run Exile in Bookville at 410 South Michigan Avenue, Suite 210 in downtown Chicago. I really get a kick out of saying Suite 210. It makes it sound so fancy. Tonight, we are so very excited to host two talented writers from one of our favorite independent presses, $2 Radio, who are based out of Columbus, Ohio. So when Eliza and Eric from $2 Radio approached us recently to host Kalani Pickhart for her debut novel, I Will Die in a Foreign Land, and that she would be in conversation with Katya Apekina, there was no way we were going to say no. So thank you both for being here tonight. Okay, this is very exciting. Here is Kalani's book. It's beautiful. We were just talking about the painting. And when I first saw it, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous cover, but I feel like they're underwater. I don't know why. I feel like it's like an underwater scene, but I could be wrong. And Katya's book, which we are huge fans of here at Exile, The Deeper the Water, The Uglier the Fish. Kalani Pickhart holds an MFA in creative writing from Arizona State University. She is a recipient of research fellowships from the Virginia G. Piper Center and the U.S. Department of State Bureau of Intelligence for Eastern European and Eurasian Studies. I Will Die in a Foreign Land is her first novel. Congratulations. Katya Apekina is a novelist, screenwriter, and translator. Her novel, The Deeper the Water, The Uglier the Fish, was named a Best Book of 2018 by Kirkus, Buzzfeed, LitHub, and others, and was a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize. It's been translated into Spanish, Catalan, French, German, and Italian. Born in Moscow, she currently lives in Los Angeles. You can purchase both books through the link that Kristen will provide in the chat, and each book comes with a signed book plate. We're very happy to have you all here tonight, and we encourage you to keep your cameras on, but please mute yourselves during until the Q&A portion. Please submit those questions and comments into the chat, and Katya will be happy to ask those. I'm going to pass it along to our esteemed guests now. Thank you guys again for being here. I'm so excited about this, to listen in on the conversation. And everyone enjoy the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, yay. So excited.
So how do you want to do it? Do you want to read first? Do you want me to read first? What's better for you?
Go ahead. You can go ahead and read first. I'll listen to you read first.
I'll be quick. So I'm reading from The Deeper the Water, The Uglier the Fish. We were talking earlier about how it's tricky when we both wrote books with fragmented narratives to read short excerpts from them can be like a little bit confusing. So wish me luck. All right. So this first excerpt is from the father, Dennis Lomax's journal from 1970. And the story is about two sisters, Edie and May, who leave New Orleans, where they live with their mother after she's committed to a mental hospital, to move in with their dad in New York City. And this is from his journal from 1970, so like when he was first in a relationship with their mom. Last night I began something big and alive. I don't want to speak too soon, but maybe finally a book. I typed, and Marianne lay on the mattress on the floor watching me. With her, I'm an open glove welcoming a hand. It's her energy working through me. I'm certain of it. I wrote all night. Outside it rains. Marianne lay on her back, raised her arms, squinted at her ring, fell asleep. Yesterday, my sister came into the city for a visit, and as we were passing City Hall, I felt compelled to get married. We bought carnations dyed bright blue from the deli across the street. Look, Marianne had said, running her thumb along the stems, veined like arms. We stopped a tourist on the street, asked him to take a picture of us with his camera. He promised to mail it, and since our marriage, the urge to write has consumed me. Beneath all my words, like subway clatter. My wife, my life, my wife. It was already light out when I stopped and crawled in beside her. I needed more of her to keep going. They bit me all night long, she told me, sleepily showing me her arm, a row of small red welts. The bed bugs live between the floorboards and inside the electrical sockets. I'll bite you too, I said, and I did. Then after, in the bathroom mirror, as I washed my face, I caught sight of my earlobe, 2 uneven lines, marks from her crooked front teeth, and again that zap of desire. I ran back to bed, unbuttoned the blouse from the bottom that she had begun buttoning from the top. She's shy, but about all the wrong things. I moved her hands off her breasts and kissed her wrists, pinned her down. And then her whispered refrain, "You can save me," for which there is only one answer: yes, of course, yes. And the next section is from Marianne McLean's journal. So it's 15 years later in 1985. And that's their mother and his wife. They make me fill out idiotic worksheets here. I wonder about my head, the feeling of cotton in my head. I think of Daddy, a cotton ball sticking out of his nose, out of his ear. Oh, how he was prone to infections. They say not to worry. The cotton feeling is because of the coma. To give it a few days and it will dissipate. I think no, as usual, I have not made myself clear. I want more cotton. I want to be taxidermied, but they don't do that at this hospital. The therapist is an idiot. I told him about the tree stump, about how I took the girls to the woods near where my house used to be. Daddy's art studio flattened under a parking lot for a piggly fucking wiggly. There's no dignity, there's no justice. We were walking even though I had not meant to get out of the car. We were walking and then I was hitting a rotten tree stump with a stick. It would make this thump when I hit it, a dull sound. And I don't know why, but the sound excited me very much. I could feel it in my heart. The girls were like little monkeys. They found their own sticks and they were digging in the ground with them. May had a wet cough. It gave me the feeling that her insides were the rotten stump and it was her I had been hitting. It's terrible to always have to keep track of the edges of things as they slide away from you. Of course, the therapist didn't know what to make of the story. It's okay to express anger, he said. Hit something, that's an idea. Holding out his palms for me to punch. The worst part is that Dennis is the only one left who has any idea what I'm talking about. How infuriating to have him as a screen always between me and the world, my translator, my Apollo. What's it like to be married to a man who understands women so keenly, people have asked me. It's unbearable. Unbearable. He is a thief. He steals from me constantly. The what exactly I can't say, and he's a liar. And what it is exactly he lies about, I can't say either. But you see, this doesn't make it any less true. And that I, at 16, could have foreseen it. I was the one, after all, who chose the name Cassandra. Apollo spits in my mouth, and now nobody believes me. Those thick alligator teardrops sliding down his cheeks as he suffocates me for my own good, as he squeezes me from the bottom up. Literally? That's what Doreen wants to know. Literally, not literally. What's the difference? His breath is on my face even when he isn't here. And then this last little bit is from May, one of the daughters. That afternoon was the first time I felt, I don't know how to describe it exactly. My head was in Dad's lap and all the happiness that I'd missed was being compressed into that moment. I looked up at him and I was no longer me. I was Mom, but not as I knew her. This wasn't her forcing her darkness on me like a bag over my head. No, this was something else. I'd become Mom from many years ago. Dad felt it too, I could tell. Maybe it would have lasted longer if not for Edie talking and talking, pressing and pressing. She wanted to take me back to the other mother, the one in the mental hospital who needed me brought to her, tied and quartered like a sacrifice. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love all those parts in that book. That's just, yeah.
Oh, thank you. I can't wait to hear you.
Well, so I think I'll start. I think I'm just going to start at the beginning and read a few different, as I read through the beginning, there'll be a few different like tone changes. So good sampling, I guess. All right. Prologue. Enter Kobzari singing. Where does it begin? It depends on who you ask. It could begin with Scythians and Cimmerians, Slavs and the Rus, Queen Olha, Vladimir the Great, Yaroslav the Wise. It could begin with Kiev, Ilya Muromets, the Cossacks, the UNR, the UPA. One thing is certain, it doesn't just begin here, my friend. It doesn't begin or end with Stalin. It doesn't begin or end with Yanukovych or Poroshenko or Zelensky. It doesn't begin or end with Putin. The war has always been quiet. Like a pulse, it can be forgotten, unnoticed. Like a pulse, we can feel it as long as we're still here. Lean your ear onto the chest of a corpse and you'll hear it, emptiness like an echo. Have you ever listened to your wristwatch when it stopped ticking? The sound of it, that aching hollowness, like a dry fountain cracking in the sun. We've known thirst. We've known hunger here. Ah, my friend, you ask us where to begin. How can we? How many times have you carried your dead through your streets? We sing the history of Kiev. Come and you will see. The captain. He wakes in his apartment, a bed, a desk, a kitchenette, a radio. The upright piano, a black polished Diedrich Friere, elaborately carved in the fashion of the late 19th century, stands against an otherwise bare wall. The bearish piano faces him when he emerges from the bedroom, goes to the bath. When he washes his face, dry soap and cold water, he sees the ancient image of his own father, gone so many years ago. The young people in Kiev have come to protest abuses of their government. He heard them, saw them gathering in the street. He doesn't remember when exactly the thought came to him, but he remembers putting on his father's Soviet jacket and the balaclava to cover his face, and he quite simply went. The square was filled with people singing, holding hands, holding up the Ukrainian flag, blue bar atop yellow bar. The open sky over the golden grain. The women wore flowers in their hair, the men flowers on their jackets, their hope contagious. He cut through the crowd, uplifted and exhilarated with purpose. This feeling, he recalls, this is how it all began. The street piano was where it had always been, there on Kreshchatik, where he would play day after day. Abandoned by some unknown donor, the light oak top, board bent from weather, the epoxy chipped and worn. He wipes the seat of snow, lifts the cover to expose the white teeth. He warms his hands with his breath, his gloves black with the fingers cut. He twists the ring on his finger, his father's silver ring. A crowd gathers as he begins to play. Part 1, Maidan. Unity Day, protesters killed in Kiev, Ukraine, January 22nd, 2014. 2 activists were shot and killed, and a third is in critical condition on Wednesday during nonviolent demonstrations in the capital city of Ukraine. The protests began on November 21st, 2013, after President Viktor Yanukovych declined to sign an association agreement with the European Union and instead considered joining the Eurasian Economic Union, building closer ties to President Vladimir Putin of Russia. Thousands of Ukrainians responded to the move by gathering in the city center, citing governmental corruption and Yanukovych's abuses of power. Protesters also voiced resistance to Russian influence. Ukraine, which has been an independent country since 1991 following the fall of the Soviet Union, has a long, complex history with Russia, resulting in distrust, especially from younger generations of Ukrainians. The 2 deaths are the first reported at Maidan Nezalezhnosti, or Independence Square. The Berkut police force have been criticized globally for their violent response to the protest, which has included the use of stun grenades, tear gas, batons, and cutting off cell phone communications. Despite these brutal attacks, the number of protesters at Independence Square has only grown in size. Many protesters camping in tents and building barricades to protect themselves against the police force. Journalists covering the unrest in Ukraine have also been targeted. Ukrainian journalist Ihor Lutsenko, 35, was abducted from a hospital along with protester Yuri Verbitsky, 50. Lutsenko was discovered 12 hours later, wandering the crest of a forest on the outskirts of Kiev near Boryspil Airport. Barely able to walk, Lutsenko had been beaten on the soles of his feet, had a black eye, and was missing a tooth. Lutsenko believed the 10 men who abducted him were affiliated with the Berkut police, stating the men repeatedly asked him who had paid him to participate in the protests, presuming Lutsenko had been provided compensation from Western organizations. He had not. Not far from where Lutsenko was discovered, so was the body of Verbitsky. He had been bound, ribs broken, and internal organs smashed. The autopsy indicated that Verbitsky had died of hypothermia. The deaths have caused further outrage and protests throughout the country. St. Michael's Golden Domed Monastery, January 19th, 2014, morning. The snow in Boston, Katya thinks, must be thick like cake. She flicks her cigarette. A black cloud of burning tires near the Maidan less than a mile away forces a cough. The air is frigid. The injured have not rested. The light outside is disappearing. St. Michael's appears to be inside an apocalyptic snow globe. Golden spirals, eye blue walls, ember and ash ethereal. The bell tower stands like a soldier. Indeed, it is. We're all underwater here, Katya thinks, shaken loose like silt, an undertow, a baptism, a drowning. Last spring, Boston had a bombing. Now she was in Kiev. Kiev had been burning for months. The tactical police force, the Berkut, had started attacking thousands of peaceful protests at Maidan in November. St. Michael's opened its doors, bells ringing and priests singing, and the people came from Maidan to the church. Hundreds had been injured, some were dead. Distrust of the government caused hospitals to turn up in the streets, in shoe stores, in the Hotel Ukraine, and St. Michael's Golden Domed Monastery. Here, Katya is far from home. The holy men of the church, men of all faiths, start to pray, to hold a vigil. They took the bodies to a makeshift morgue in the back of the church, and the people prayed. God is still here, they said. They said, pray. Vigilance, vigilance, stay awake. Katya's son, Isaac, would have been 6 years old and still cherub-faced. Ezra had sent her an email that she hadn't yet read. Katya looks at her phone, the message from her husband. A priest calls out to her, Likar, budlaska, doctor, please. Katya kills the cigarette under her boot and goes. All empires fall. First, the Mongols destroyed parts of the church, then the Soviets, then it was rebuilt. Gold and blue, the church is grotesquely beautiful. It looks like Byzantium, the word so full of promise, the new Rome. She has seen pictures of the Sistine Chapel, and it must be something like this. Here, there are paintings on the walls, the ceiling, the columns, bright sashes and wings on cherubs, gowns and crowns decorating saints, all looking, seeing, vigilance. She felt they could see every part of her, all that raw ache. Inside the church among the injured, an old Soviet man is dying. He wears a military jacket with Soviet insignia sewn upside down. His skull is bleeding underneath the black balaclava he wears, covering his face. Katya takes off her winter coat. A nurse takes it from her and directs her on to the washroom. The medics here all wear white shirts with the red cross taped on the chest on their helmets. Above them, hundreds of saints look down, their large, heavy eyes watching her, their hands lifted to God. Men and women are huddled on the ground under the paintings, under the gold chalices. They are young and old. They pray, crossing themselves. A circle of older women, their heads covered in scarves, pray under a portrait of the Virgin. Katya walks past. The Soviet man has been moved from the floor to a makeshift operating table. He is stripped of his balaclava, his pants, and shoes. His leg is soaked in blood, shrapnel thick inside the thin skin. When she removes the mask, she can see he's been blinded by a powder, his eyes closed, tears trailing down his cheeks, rinsing grime from his face. He has a traumatic brain injury and is showing signs for stroke. Katya dresses for surgery amidst the wailing people and the watchful saints. She covers her mouth, her hands. The nurse crosses herself and says a prayer. They go to work. The blanket beneath the old man had become wet with blood, and there is nothing she can do until he's put to sleep. The wounds isolated, the anesthesia pushed into the skin, and he's out. She takes the old man's wrists and feels the faint beat, beat, beat. She says to him in Russian, "You are a strong man. You can make it through." Once she's removed the shrapnel, Katya and the nurse muster a tourniquet, ceasing the bleeding. His leg is raised. An IV punched into the veins of his left arm. Alkaline, lidocaine, corneal gel applied to the eyes. Katya calls for a blanket and she's given one by a nurse. The nurse had taken it from a dead man a few feet away. She had covered the dead man with a sheet. The nurses help her wrap the old man in the blanket and Katya understands he is soon going to die. She watches the old man's chest. It rises. Hours later, Katya and a nurse examine the bandages, the blood pressure. The sheets, the walls, the bandages are white. He says, slurring, trembling from the cold, Kisa, Kisa. It means kitten. Katya is struck by the strangeness of it. A pet name? A pet? Isaac would play in the snow until he shook like a bird. He sat on her lap in fleece pajamas after she had him take a warm bath. Katya wrapped the blanket around them both and breathed. They sat by the fire, and Katya smelled his hair as she read to him stories. Today, her son would have been 6 years old. Katya pulls back her hair. She washes her hands. Above the sink, Mary holds baby Jesus and watches Katya splash water on her face. Katya looks up. In the Bible, Simeon says to Mary on the death of Jesus, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. Mary knew what she was getting into. What kind of fucking sacrifice is that?
Great. That setting, I remember you had said that like seeing that church in person when you went to do research, right? Wasn't it
Yeah.
Church? Like how it was just so like inspiring for you.
Yeah.
And it's such an amazing setting in your book too.
Thank you.
I assume it really was used as a makeshift hospital.
Yeah, it was. There were photographs that I saw prior to like going there, and yeah, it was like interesting to see it. Like, I think, I'm looking at it as a church or like as a hospital before I'm going there, and then then to see it in real life as like a place of worship, it was just very moving, because I had the image of those like photographs in the back of my mind of just like the people like laying out on the floor and being taken care of and stuff. So that's kind of like where the book also like really became real for me too. When I visited Ukraine, that was the moment that I was like, this is not just a book, this is something that's like bigger than me, I think, or I know.
Yeah, can you talk a little just about the story of the book, like what the seeds were for it and how it sort of grew?
Yeah, so in the first like year of my MFA, I was kind of like asked to, our first workshop was a novel writing workshop. So we had to have some sort of like content to push forward. And I initially started writing a book that was completely unlike this. It was actually like about baseball. And but I just remember having a moment. I came home from classes and I was watching, I decided to watch the documentary that ultimately ended up inspiring it, which was the Winter on Fire, which is on Netflix. And it just really moved me. It was one of those things where I just felt really captivated by these people who were so much wanting to change their situation, I think. And as far as like, protests go, I mean, like I've grown up knowing about, the LA riots and things like that, and really being moved by that. And so when I saw this in Ukraine, I saw an opportunity to not only like learn something new, but to also kind of challenge myself in the sense of like being a writer, that like, if I'm going to write a historical novel, it should be now when I'm in this MFA program and I have the time to do a lot of research. And so at the same time of, seeing this documentary, being moved by it and doing the research on Ukraine, I also was in a novel reading class for my MFA, and we were reading The Unbearable Lightness of Being. And I felt that while I was doing this research on Ukraine, and then while I'm reading this book about, this country being shut down, it was just it was like a mirror, so that kind of fell into place. And I think that the thread that kind of kept it all together was the Rite of Spring, which is just something that always shocked me. It turned out that, it's written by Stravinsky, so it was Russian and, in its own way. And, but I was really moved by the story of it, and the fact that it's sort of like a, there's this virgin sacrifice at the end. And I don't know, there were just a lot of connections that I felt were kind of falling into place. I couldn't quite describe everything as it was happening, but there was the Prague Spring that was going on, and then the protests in Kiev ended in March or February, right before spring starts. And so it was just this, it just all kind of fell into place in that way. And I think that thematically, I was really, once those pieces kind of fell together, then it became so much like the momentum for the story just kind of went forward.
Mm-hmm. And then you went to Ukraine after that?
So I was, that was my first year. I wrote the first draft, my first full draft. And then in my second year, I got a fellowship to go to Ukraine, and I went to Prague as well. So I went to Kiev and I went to Prague, and I also took a very intense Ukrainian language course right before I went to Kiev, and it was really difficult, and I don't think as much grip on the language as I did before, but it was really important to me to learn as much as I could. And so I feel that's just a different way of connecting to place. And so I was able to do the 8 weeks of this intensive Ukrainian here in Phoenix. And then immediately after I finished the courses, I got on a plane and went to Kiev, and I was there for 2 weeks. And then I went to Prague for another week.
Sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you, so you wrote a draft that takes place in a place you had never been to, and then you went to the place.
Yeah.
And then what was that like? Did the place of your imagination match up with the place that you visited? What was that experience like?
Well, I think that so it was interesting because I think that I felt I knew so much about it already, having just done all the research and looking at maps and okay, could Misha walk from here to here? You know what I mean? Is that reasonable? I was kind of just shooting in the dark for a really long time. But yeah, when I actually went there, and I was using my Ukrainian and stuff, and it just changed it for me. I think that before, you're writing a book, and I think that I was caught up in the story and making sure that it was, somewhat consistent, or I knew where it was going and that kind of thing. But by the time I was ready for a second draft, and I was abroad, that's kind of when things really started to feel more real. being in the church, like I walked everywhere in Kiev just to get a sense of like where, how these people were navigating the city. And I ended up like staying like in a place like right on Shovkochina Street, which is where Slava lives. So it was just like, yeah, and Hrushevsky Street was just like right there, and like Khrushchev was just right there, and it was just really like, it just became more real, I think. And walking around the city, that at the time that I was there, Oleg Sentsov was like still in prison, and they had all of these signs around the streets. And this is a Ukrainian filmmaker who is basically imprisoned in Russia. And so they had these like these protests, like flyers and things like that around. And Independence Square it still had remnants of like the protests still there, which was super moving. It's like got all this graffiti and like notes and like names and everything like that on there. And I don't know, I think that just going there, it became a lot more real. Like it was not just, like really hesitant to call any of the people in the book like characters. I know that that's like a word that like, writers use, but it just became like so real for me that it hasn't felt right to be like, this is character,
Are they based on actual people or like composites of people or individual people?
There was like some interest that I had in, there's one Ukrainian woman that I talked to who was here in my very early stages of writing the book. I was like hooked up in the Eastern European like center that we have. And so I talked to a few different people like about the book, like just to kind of see if this is something I should do, if this is like, something I could understand. And I ended up talking to a Ukrainian woman who she's a journalist, and she was in Kiev during the protests, and her husband was a doctor. And so in some way, maybe that like, crept into my like subconscious, I think. But I think that like learning more about the protests also was just like, okay, who, like, if I'm like embodying these different roles in the protests just seems super captivating for me. I don't think that it would not have been like the same book if there wasn't like some focus on journalism, because that was such an important part of the protests themselves. And so that was something that I think was inherent. And I just thought that like when I was first kind of feeling out Katya, which is weird because you're Katya, I knew that I needed an outsider to be able to enter the city, and she's an outsider, she is and she isn't. And, her being a doctor was something that I've always just been interested in. I was interested in the medics and the people who were there to just help, I just think there was a lot of bravery associated with that. And the others just kind of filled out in their own way. But yeah.
Yeah, so Katya was originally from the Ukraine, but she grew up in Boston. And so yeah. Just to give people context.
Oh, sorry, yes.
I
not good at this yet.
No, you're great. I'm just thinking well, the thing that I think is so interesting is like a lot of times when you're writing fiction, it feels like you're like tapping into some sort of like universal truth or whatever, you're like imagining things so clearly, and it's like not, for me, it's like I might have like a few pieces of research, but I've never actually before written about a place that I haven't been to physically. And so even though like everything else has been made up, like I've always felt like, oh, I have to like really know the physical space in order to like picture it. Though actually more recently I've been writing historical fiction, so it's kind of it's my first time away from it, but I just think it's so interesting to like imagine a place so clearly and then actually visit that place and then like I guess merge those two, like reality and your original, it must feel like deja vu or something to be in a place that you haven't actually been to, but it feels so familiar because you've been studying it. And
yeah, that was definitely the case. Yeah. And it was even, I mean, obviously it was way better being there. It was like, street musicians, just like, a totally different energy of the city. Like it was just, yeah, I mean, like Prague too, like walking on the Charles Bridge and stuff like that. It's something that I like literally was Googling, just like, what are the statues on the Charles Bridge, and then to like be there and be like, there it is, it's like.
And it's like, even if you're seeing these like static photographs or even videos, like you're not smelling the city, you're not like hearing the ambient noise, you're not like overhearing conversations and things like that. You don't have that sense. So when you had mentioned too that you after writing this draft, is that when you hooked up with $2 Radio, or can you talk about what that process of working with them was like for you?
Yeah. So I wrote my second draft right before I finished my MFA. So I finished that like ish around like 2019 in April or so. And then I was like super convicted to just keep going with it. I was just like, if I stop this, I'm the type of person where I have to zero in on like one thing at a time. I couldn't just like continue to like, oh, I'm just gonna dabble in short stories now. It was just like I had to like see it through. So I started doing a third revision, and I worked on that for the next 6 months. So I think that I ended up submitting to $2 Radio probably around like, I don't know. It was like the winter, it was like right before the pandemic stuff started happening. So I'd say like maybe like January, February, something like that. I don't know. But so I was also sending it out to like agents and that kind of thing too. And it's funny because when Eric and I were trying to figure out like how do you write like how do you describe this book, like the jacket or whatever that, how do we sum this plot down? I think that I really like struggled with that with agents especially. And, I ended up, I was gonna just table it, and I was just like convinced that I was just like, this just isn't gonna work. I don't think that, anybody wants to read this book. And, but I kept my like submission active, with $2 Radio, and just let it kind of run its course. And I lucked out because on like Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, like last year, I got a message from Eric saying, is this still available? Like, are the rights still available? And I was like, yes. I remember like waking up and being like, oh my God, crazy. Yeah. And then I was like sweating for like 2 or 3 weeks, like waiting for, I didn't hear anything else. And I was like, okay, I don't know what's happening. And I actually reached out to them to say like, hey, don't know if you're still thinking about this, but it'd be super awesome if you are. And so that was like kind of, they're like, oh yeah, totally, like, let's do this, So after that, it was like a whirlwind romance, I guess. It was crazy. I remember, talking to Eric on the phone the first time that, before we actually signed, agreements and stuff. But I'd love to hear like how things went for you too, Katya. But Eric had all these like really awesome ideas, and there were certain details that like for example, I mean, the biggest one was that their suggestion was Alexander wasn't the piano guy in the beginning. Like he wasn't this pianist. He was just sort of like, these were two separate like entities. And one thing that they suggested was like, what if Alexander is this pianist? And like, I feel like after that, it was like the plot just kind of like sucked in.
Yeah.
It's just like it all just like worked, and I was like hooked. I was like, these guys get it, like they care, like this is awesome, you know. And so yeah, then we had to like do like so much revision. It was like my whole year has been pretty much like revision and working with them. And Eliza and I had our own little like crazy weekend sending back and forth like copy edits, and it was so great. I can't imagine any other path for this book. I just feel like they just care so much about it and about like me as a writer too. So it was just like, I don't know, just super amazing to be in the $2 radio paw. So
Yeah, I loved working with them too. And I can see how it would be hard to talk about your book, because it's like on top of just kind of summing up, you have a lot of these characters and plots, and they really do, it definitely does feel very cohesive at the end, and like the stories are all connected. But I could see how kind of talking about that and then also explaining a foreign country and its political situation and what all of that means, because most people reading it probably don't really have that much background in it or don't know that much about it. So that's like this added challenge I can imagine, to have to like explain geopolitical stuff and
yeah,
the plot of your story, you know, and have to do both in like a query letter just sounds like a nightmare to me. Yeah.
definitely a nightmare. Yeah, so just really glad that they read it. So really glad that Eric and Eliza picked it up and kept going with it. So
Yeah, me too. And I think it makes sense. I mean, I feel like they have so many books that I feel like I don't know, they're just they have like a global perspective, I feel like. It's not like just super narrow, so it makes sense to me. It makes sense as a $2 radio book to me. And I do feel like there's I mean, not all of their books, but a lot of their books I feel like do have like a fragmented narrative or that kind of sensibility, so that also makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's been, I feel like just, I don't know. I've gotten like so much street cred because I had my book published with $2. People are they're like, oh my gosh. They like automatically like pull you in, you know, because they like love $2 radio books. So it's been
yeah, their books are just published with so much care. And they've been really great to work with for me, and I feel like for everybody I talk to who works with them feel the same way.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm just looking at my other questions. So your book has just been out for a couple weeks now. What does it feel like? How has your relationship to it changed since it's come out?
So like the day before it was getting released, I was like really sad, and I felt like that was really weird. I thought it was weird because I was just like, I'm like, shouldn't I be happy? Like it's kind of like, you know, like a big thing, you know, like this is something I've wanted, you know, or like, you know, this is the time, you know. But I was really like, I think sort of like grieving, it's sort of like no longer being like it's done, you know, like it's like goodbye, you know, like sent it off to college, you know, and I don't know who your friends are, you know, or who you hang out with anymore. But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, it's hard to like let something go. I mean, like I wasn't expecting that. I think that like I was there were certain points during the process where, you know, you feel like relief. And I felt like I was feeling like relief over and over again because we were doing all of these revisions and like, finally it's there, finally it's there, you know? So by the time like feeling sad about it, that was a real like shock to the system. But afterward, it's been just awesome. You know, I think that like, I still haven't physically gone to like a bookstore yet to like see it on the shelf. I haven't like done that yet. I'm like afraid I'm gonna like just like sob or something. Like, what is wrong with this poor woman? Um, but I mean, I'm just really thankful for like the response it's had. Like, you know, I've been able to do interviews with like you, and it's just been like, you know, Chicago Review of Books did an interview with me. It's just so like nice, you know, to be able to talk about it. So I think in that way it keeps it alive in a different way.
Mhm.
At the same time, I'm also like kind of like chomping a little bit at the bit to do something new, you know? But right now it's nice. Like you never know. It's so like freshly out there that you don't know what it's going to do, you know? Like it's like who's going to read it? I don't know, you know? It's kind of like exciting in that way. So I'm just really like proud of it. And I know Eric and Eliza are too. And yeah, definitely would not be the same book if they weren't a part of it. And it's just something that like, I feel like it's so rare that you can like close a chapter and feel like, yes, like that was great, you know? And that I can like hold this book and be like, you know, maybe, you know, maybe I noticed a weird italicized thing. It's fine. It's okay. My bad, you know, but I feel like just so proud of it that it's just like, it's done and it's perfect the way it is. And you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So do what you will with it, critics. Bring it forth.
I feel like it's been getting like it got starred reviews, and it's just it seems like people are really getting it and connecting with it.
Yeah. I think the thing that's made me the most nervous is actually like Ukrainian and Russian, you know, folks reading it. And so far I've had really positive responses. So that's so far a relief. But I'm also like really interested when there is criticism of it, like, you know, if I were to get that criticism from like, you know, Ukrainian or Russian, American or not, you know, to see what the misses were, you know, because I'm also like, I really want to grow from it. And the whole process was definitely like a growing experience, you know, doing something like this is just naturally is, you know, writing a book, it's hard. So, but yeah, I think
right now you're working on, you mentioned that you were working on a new project. Is it similar to this one? Is it also historical?
I think in some aspect it will be a little bit historical. Actually, it'll probably be historical, but I think that part of that comes with just like I don't know. I feel like there's just like I like being transported, you know, myself, and you know, I think like the best advice, like, and it's like cliche advice that folks give, but you know, just like write the book that you want to read. And I think that that's like, you know, at first I'm like, do I really want to like, you know, put myself into a historical fiction type, you know, thing? And I think I don't really care as much, you know, I just want to keep writing what I want to write. But I think that this one is going to be in some ways similar. I think I can't imagine writing a book without it being sort of like a collage of like, you know, I couldn't picture myself like writing a book just like straight through, like completely linear, like that kind of thing. But I think like subject matter, it's going to be like completely different. It might even have like a little like kind of like a gothic twist to it, you know? So yeah, I'm excited for that too. It's just a whole different mood, a whole different, like, I think it's going to take place in the US, so, but yeah, I'm excited to do something new, but we'll see how soon that begins.
Yeah. Are there any book recommendations or books that you're reading while writing I Will Die in a Foreign Land that you want to mention?
That's a hard question. I feel like I feel like weird answering the question only because like so many of the books that I read were like actually assigned to me. You know what I mean? Like the books that I ended up pulling like using as like models were like, we read Atonement and Unbearable Lightness of Being and The English Patient. Those were just sort of like, I think that books that easily sort of fit into like, if you liked this book, you may enjoy, what I mean, that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like as far as I think the biggest influence was probably this history book that I'd read. I always forget exactly the name, but it's in my acknowledgements. This like incredible like history book about just the whole shebang. Let me see here. I think that mostly I was also like influenced more by like film. I'd say that like while I'm, just lots of like documentaries on the subject. I watched like some very old, Soviet films and things like that too. But yeah, I can't remember what this is called. I wish that it was in here. Or I think it's in here. I'm just like nervous and I can't find it. So
well, people can buy a copy and look in these
and find it. Yes. Find it. Yeah. But
I guess if anyone also in the audience has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And I was curious, what was your State Department? Is the State Department fellowship the same thing as the other trip to Ukraine, or was that a separate thing?
So that helped cover my Ukrainian language courses. Yeah, the U.S. Department of State, they had a essentially like a huge like scholarship for Ukrainian language learners, and so I went out with that, and some of that money ended up being pooled into like the actual trip too. So yeah.
That's cool. I'm working right now on a book with like part of it is set in revolutionary Russia. So I'm also like, a lot of these questions I'm asking you about, your research and stuff. And I'm just curious. Yeah.
So you're doing like the Russian Revolution stuff?
Well, that's just one of the storylines.
Okay, great.
In it. It's, yeah.
Very cool.
And it's, it's like I've been reading a ton of books about it, but it's funny because then when I like showed a draft to my mom, so I was born in Russia, but like I don't, I left when I was 3, so I feel like I don't really know it that well, and not that she knows what revolutionary Russia was like, but she knows like it more than I do probably, and she had a lot of notes, so yeah, I guess we could call it that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking. There's a question about the transition between first draft and publisher pickup.
Oh, so you took my question.
So I'm pivoting to that. My question is about this is from Sawyer. I guess, do you want to, I'm not sure what the question is, but maybe do you want to just talk more about the transition from the first draft to the publisher pickup? It sounded like It's mostly selfish, Sawyer says. Can you give Sawyer some advice maybe on the transition from first draft to getting the book published?
Yeah.
And that's a question that everybody usually wants to.
I know.
Yeah.
I wish there was like a magic like number that you could just like definitely by the 5th time, you know, but first draft to publish or pick up. I'd say that probably 3 times. I think that it was the 3rd draft that I had finished before Eric and Eliza picked it up. That being said, it was a very sloppy 3. Looking back, it's just completely different. I just can't. So, but even then it was just like a completely different manuscript. So the past year's been even more revision with it. So I guess like take like heart in knowing that your book doesn't have to be like perfect, like just throw it through the publishing, you know, machine and it'll just come out the other side. Yeah, but I think that like by the 3rd time I had a pretty like decent handle on like the major bits of the story. So that when I was working with Eric and Eliza, I could like more confidently like say like, I'll like this change makes sense, or like maybe we can talk about this change and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd say like when you're confident in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to have a really firm sense of what it is you want to write before you start making edits.
Yeah.
Other people's notes, because otherwise it can feel very confusing, I think, if you don't have like a firm sense of what it is you're making first.
I agree. I think that there's just one thing that I'm glad that I say like fought, and that's not even a word. Like, I mean, that's not even like exactly, it wasn't even that, you know, it was just like I think that initially, you know, the thought was to have like these Kobzari sections, which are kind of like in verse. They're essentially like, they act as like a Greek chorus throughout the book. They were, you know, we kind of were like, well, can we, you know, I think that the thought from $2 Radio was it's more marketable if it's not just like straight poetry. And I agreed with them to an extent. We kept it mostly, that's when like the conversation about like, I think it's actually kind of like this Greek chorus type thing that keeps popping in. And so yeah, I think that like once you know like the story, it's easier for you to like then like advocate, you know, with the publisher or your editor on like what you're trying to do. And if you're not sure, I mean, there were a lot of times where I would like, you know, Eric would be like, cut this thing. And I'd be like, no, sir. And then I would read it again and I was like, yes, sir. Bye. I don't even miss it. So yeah.
There's also this, I think it's more of a statement than a question, but I'll just read it from Melissa. It's unbelievable to me that you've written a book with such depth and understanding of Ukraine and its history and culture, and that you aren't of Ukrainian background. Congratulations. I realize you've done a lot of research, reading, etc. Plus you traveled there, but the fact that you were able to get inside the characters and speak to the readers from their perspectives, amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was so surprised when we talked for the first time for Electric Lit. I had assumed that you had some sort of like family background or connection. And yeah, it was so impressive that you were able to do that just from research alone.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that like, you know, one thing that I did struggle with, like with the book early on, was whether or not this is a story that I should like tell, you know, because I'm not Ukrainian and I'm not Russian, and I have some, you know, roots to like the Balkans, but that's not obviously the same thing at all. So I did struggle a lot with whether or not I should write this book in the first place, like whether or not it was my place. And I'm glad that I leaned into it and that discomfort. And I think that because I was uncomfortable with writing it, that I really, really, really wanted to get it like right, or I wanted it to feel authentic and, you know, work through the like minutia details, you know, like Eliza was working overtime, making sure that all of the names that are listed in the book from the individuals who've passed, making sure that all of those names were like perfect, you know, because it's really important if you're going to print somebody's name, you know, it's like a family member could read this, you know, like that it's like legacy stuff, you know. And so yeah, I think that like in retrospect, I don't know, I think I was just always thinking about the fact of like, I don't want to hurt somebody by writing this book, you know. And I'm glad that so far I haven't. So I hope that that's the case.
There's a follow-up question from Melissa asking what your relationship is to the
So my great grandparents on my dad's side were from Serbia, and it was sort of like this, that area of the world as well as just been like owned by different, you know, folks for different periods. My dad always grew up and told us that we were like Austrian, and my dad was born in Austria, and you know, grew up there and in Germany, but come to find out that the city that, you know, his mom was born and his grandparents were born, like it was this little tiny town in what's now Serbia. So that's kind of my connection to the Balkans.
Any other questions from people? Feel free to add them. Yeah, I don't know. What other question? I'm just looking at my notes.
Thank you.
I was just looking at my notes, but I feel like we kind of went over them. I just really enjoyed your book, and I'm excited to read your next one.
I'm really excited about yours too. I'm like, yeah, I had recently like read yours and was like just so glad that, I don't know, your book just really moved me a lot as well. So it made me feel all sorts of things. It's a good one. I just really
too. I felt very moved reading it
same.
over and over again. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, thanks. That was fantastic. And the readings are great as well. And not to pile on to the $2 radio love here, but that you just, you know, you guys are in good hands. Not only are they respected publisher in, you know, one of the most respected publishers in the United States at the very least, they run a really great bookstore, and they know both sides, and they work both sides, and they know what it's like to be on both sides, and they treat that with care and respect, and with their authors as well. So you know that once the book gets out there, you know, from $2 radio, from Galley, you know, ARC, Advanced Readers copies, and they get those out to booksellers, it's going to be in good hands, because every time we get one of those packages from Eric and Eliza, we can't wait to open it and see what's next. And as a matter of fact, I just received this
Yay.
like 4 days ago, and I finished it over 2 days, and I'm a slow reader. So I mean, we get excited because they're one of us, you know. And so you guys are in very great hands, and I can't thank them enough for being there. Whenever we go to conferences, and you know, I see Eric at conferences, it's when you want to be seen with them. I hate to say, I know Eric, you're probably out there, but I feel like I'm with the cool kids when I'm talking to Eric, and you talk about street cred, it raises your street cred a little bit. But enough about that, Eric. I'm sorry, you're probably blushing. And thank you, Eliza, too, for being. You guys are just awesome, and everyone at $2 Radio publish really quality work, and we're just excited to be a part of it. So, everyone. I will die in a foreign land. We will have signed book plates, I believe, at some point, and we will be happy to ship them out after we ship the book to you. Holidays are right around the corner. Pick up multiple copies. You'll be the hit of the party. And the deeper water, the uglier fish. If you know anybody about me and about the bookstores I've worked at, I absolutely love this book, and I'll come and talk to us about both of them. We'll be happy to discuss. Oh, there it is. Thank you all. That was a fantastic event. Thanks everyone for turning out. And if there's anything we can do for you guys at all, please, Kalani and Katya, please let us know. We'll be happy to help out. And Kalani, once again, congratulations on the edition of your book. And we look forward to whatever comes next.
Oh, thanks. So excited. Thank you.
Right. Thanks. You guys have a good night.
Great to finally meet you, both of you.
Yes, exactly. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.